When I started this painting, I wasn't thinking about philosophy. I was just tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind of exhaustion that lives under the skin, even when everything in your life is technically right. I've spent a long time wondering why high achievers feel empty. On the surface, I have everything I worked for. I am safe. I am supported. I am stable. My family is here. My partner is here. I sleep in a quiet room in a peaceful home. Yet, I still wake up in the middle of the night, screaming my head off. When everything is safe and I am at peace, I still feel like something is chasing me. I've felt followed for most of my life, and I still don't know by what. No one is pushing me anymore, but I still create this constant sense of urgency, always slightly behind the finish line that doesn't exist. I think the pace was set in 2010. I was a fresh immigrant in a small city in Australia. I had no ability to speak English. I failed every English subject throughout my entire time in middle school in Korea, right up until I came to Australia. Before the survival mode kicked in, there was a year of strange, quiet limbo. For about 12 months, I didn't study and I didn't go to school. I stayed home. I spent my days walking around unfamiliar streets, riding my bicycle, going to the library, and doing small, mundane things like learning how to drive. As the introvert I am, I didn't know how I felt at the time. I thought I was just resting. But looking back, I realized I was sitting in a deep, hollow powerlessness. I had no direction and no guidance. I was a ghost in a new country, waiting for someone to tell me who I was supposed to be. That silence ended the moment I moved out on my own with no plan. The shift was violent and immediate. I forced myself to work in a small tea store just to pay for my roof and my bread. It was there that I had a realization that would haunt me for the next decade. I walked into a store and realized that a simple orange was too expensive for me to afford. It wasn't just about the fruit. It was the terrifying clarity that everything was now in my hands. No one else would look after me. If I wanted to survive, I had to become my own guardian, my own provider, and my own taskmaster. I looked at my life and decided that no one would ever look after her, the girl I used to be, unless I did it myself. In that survival-driven silence, I learned to rely on output. I forgot how to stop. I realized that if I couldn't be the smartest person in the room, I would be the most disciplined. If I couldn't be naturally gifted, I would outwork everyone. I began to view my time as a currency that had to be spent on doing. If a minute wasn't productive, it felt like I was slipping back toward that version of myself who couldn't afford an orange. I traded my rest for a sense of control, and for a long time, the trade felt worth it. I was building a wall between myself and the powerlessness I felt in 2010. That survival instinct rewarded me. It got me through my work, through TAFE, my first internship, and finally my first office job. I remember the feeling of sitting at my first professional desk. It felt like a trophy. Then came university, more offices, and eventually various different businesses. I was climbing a ladder that I thought had a top, but the higher I went, the more the ladder seemed to stretch. Consistency eventually turns into habit, and habit hardens into identity. I realized that when your identity is built on performance, Rest doesn't feel like a break. It feels like failure. It feels like the ladder is shaking. For a long time, I didn't realize that my productivity wasn't proving my worth. It was a drug. I was using the busyness to numb my anxiety. If I was moving, I didn't have to feel the fear of being not enough. I didn't have to look at my mirror and ask myself what I was doing all this for, even if I had already achieved the status of survival. I was operating without introspection, just moving forward for the next, bigger achievement. This relentless motion rewarded me with a bigger place to live and a more comfortable blanket to sleep under. But it never actually silenced the screaming in the night. I was creating new layers of doing just to hide under the rules of society's expectations. I began to realize that I was performing for an audience that wasn't even there. I set deadlines nobody asked for. I built schedules nobody imposed. And when I didn't meet them, I felt like I had failed privately and quietly. I would punish myself for missing a self-imposed mark, treating my own soul like a poorly performing employee. That's not ambition. That's conditional self-worth. It is the belief that I am only as good as my last result, only as valuable as the list of things I checked off this morning. I had reached a point where if I wasn't producing, I didn't know who I was. If nothing needed me, I felt unnecessary. I had become an engine that only knew how to run hot. So I created more work, more goals, more pressure. Every couple of years, I would burn out completely. Just a blank, empty space where a person used to be. And even then, I wouldn't stop. I would try to optimize my burnout. It was always easier to move than to sit still with the person I am when I'm not working. I was terrified of the stillness because in the stillness, the questions start to catch up to you. This painting became the physical form of that pressure. The paint is thick because the weight I carry is thick. I didn't thin it down. I didn't smooth it out. I let it drag and resist my hand. The surface holds everything. It doesn't pretend to be light. This is the struggle of the Cocohead series, finding the intersection between the beauty of the landscape and the heaviness of the person observing it. The landscape is grounded, but my experience of it is compressed. From the beginning of this series, I knew the last piece would be saturated and heavy. The earlier works had more air, more variation, but this one compresses. The color builds until the center burns. It is an accumulation of every layer I've added to my life. I wanted the viewer to feel the gravity of the pigment. I wanted the texture to be so dense that you can almost feel the calories of effort it took to move the brush across the canvas. It is a record of a person who doesn't know how to do things halfway. Those dark vertical strokes along the ridge, I kept adding them long after they were necessary. I knew I could stop, but I didn't. That is exactly how I live. I reach a milestone, and then I stack another expectation on top of it, and another, until the structure feels dense and unbreakable. It's the habit of one more thing, the belief that the ridge isn't strong enough unless I reinforce it until it's nearly black. I was painting my own exhaustion, stroke by stroke, refusing to let the canvas breathe, because I didn't know how to let myself breathe. But through my friends and through this practice, I'm learning that There is another way to exist. I'm learning that my productivity didn't just numb me, it also built a foundation. All those years of grit gave me a real, defensible confidence. I have proven to myself that I can learn and achieve anything I want. The survival skills I learned in that tea store aren't just weights, they are tools. I don't have to use them to hide anymore. I can use them to build something that actually brings me peace, rather than just more work. I don't need the noise of busyness to prove my value anymore. I'm learning how to love myself fully, outside of what I produce. This has been the hardest lesson of all, realizing that the girl who couldn't afford an orange was just as worthy of love as the woman who owns a business. My value was never in the tea store, the office desk, or the university degree. Those were just places I went. They weren't who I was. I look at the clouds in the background of this piece. They try to move. They feel lighter. I'm becoming like that, learning to let things drift without measuring the day by its output. I don't hate the weight of this ridge anymore. It shaped me. It built my resilience. But I no longer view it as a cage I'm trapped under. It is a part of the landscape, but it isn't the whole sky. I'm learning to look at the sky. I'm finally learning to detach my value from my output. I'm not standing under the pressure anymore. I'm standing on top of the foundation I built with it. I have the structural proof that I am capable. And because of that, I can finally afford to be still. The stillness is no longer a threat. It is a luxury I have earned. I don't need to run from the ghost of 2010 anymore, because I have built a house she can finally rest in. I'm still carrying the history of that immigrant kid in the tea store, and I'm still carrying the weight of this thick paint. But I'm learning how to breathe. I'm finally choosing the work instead of letting the work choose me. I'm standing on the ridge I built, and for the first time, I'm simply enjoying the view.